So nice to meet everybody. So my name is Natalie Sussman. I actually did my master's at Brandeis, finished in 2013. I was in the plastics department. I have my PhD in Greek archaeology, and I do a lot of work with digital technology and digital humanities. My job here it's in the library. It's a teaching position with research mixed in. I'm essentially here to help everyone figure out like who they need to talk to or where they need to go to do something. And then also, especially with like history and archaeology related projects, I can help you figure out how to do something. So if you have an idea and need to know how to get from point A to the end, that's what I'm here for. The idea here was that I've just been noticing since I started in August, I've just been noticing there's some disconnect on campus with what kind of is available to the grad students, both in terms of finishing dissertations and research, and then also just kind of knowing like, why should I bother taking advantage of these resources before I graduate? And then also who to talk to. And I know from personal experience, you guys are, you're weighing your time very carefully, and you can't just kind of say like, I'm going to dedicate the entire semester to learning this new method unless I know it's exactly what I need. That's kind of the goal with me coming in. I spoke to a few of your grad students. We've come together to put this together. You go to this URL, hopefully it'll work, Google Drive folder, and then you're going to have a PDF of this presentation. And then there's also a Google Doc, and it basically has like a list of everything that I mentioned with the links. The idea with this kind of seminar is that we're going to think about just one, why should you bother learning the skills here? This is primarily looking at research, but I am going to kind of throughout mention job markets in different ways, digital history skill sets that are kind of what a digital historian or a historian in any kind of capacity would be expected to have at this point. So if you look on that sheet that I gave you, it's also how this presentation is divided up. Those are going to be like the core fields. In this, I'll also talk to you about some digital research and writing management tools. So there are some digital tools that I'm going to show you ones that I personally used for my exams as well as my dissertation and then still use now. And it's a way for you to basically make your own kind of comprehensive database and be able to look up your own stuff. But it makes it a lot easier. And then I'll also be talking about how you can do this here. Pretty much, you're probably going to be interested in learning every single one of these, but again, you have limited time. So what I would say when you're looking through this stuff is to say what interests you the most, and then also which one is directly going to answer the questions I have related to my research and my career goals. What therefore should you prioritize first, like to try and keep you out of the rabbit hole. And there's always ways for you to kind of say like, I can do that later, I can do that later. So why should you integrate digital technology in your work? We're going to be talking about how it's going to improve your research exponentially when we get to the examples. The first thing I want to talk to you about is that if you learn digital skills, it's going to help you on the job market, no matter what. How many of you want to enter into the academic job market? Do you know? Like how many of you want to go for a professor or something similar to that? And how many of you are kind of uncertain? First thing I'm going to recommend to you if you're interested in going onto the digital job market or onto the academic job market is you have contingent faculty on your department. You have contingent faculty in other departments. The contingent faculty, the people who do not have a tenure track position, they are your competition. They are on the market now. They're the ones you should be talking to. So they're going to be able to tell you what's going on. The other thing you should be doing is at any stage, set up job alerts now, just so you can see what's happening. For example, when I entered in the job market in like finished in 2019. So by like 2016, I started putting job alerts on, and there was a huge boom in environmental historian, environmental archaeology, environmental geographer, basically people who are looking at environmental history from that angle, like history of people thinking about the landscape and history of people thinking about science. Things change. It's a good way for you to think about how you can reframe your kind of agenda, right? So one of you might be someone who's like, I am someone who studies Civil War. That is the way you are, that is your core, but there's a way to reframe yourself on this market for that. The same thing with the digital skills. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because you might know this, but the job market sucks right now. So they're going to set you apart from the masses. So just to kind of freak you out, but also show you, 2020, according to the NSF, 887 people got PhDs in history. Okay. I went on to higher ed jobs like 2 days ago. And since January 2021, there was 120 full-time entry-level faculty positions. Okay. Now that's not even talking about the specific fields, right? Because like a European historian is not going to be able to apply for an American historian position. Maybe, depends. 287 of them were part-time faculty jobs. The other thing is if you pay attention to these job alerts, you're going to see now that all of a sudden universities are only hiring part-time contingent faculty. Not great, but you want to be able to set yourself apart, and the digital skills are going to be the way to do it. If you look at those jobs, a lot of them are saying can teach a digital history class, can, you know, bring in digital technology into their work. That's the thing that's going to set you apart from everybody else. So that's why it's worth it. For that contingent thing, so there's a really good American Federation of Teachers survey that they recently did. And this is showing you how much people are making per course. So if you're contingent, you're not on a salary usually, or you have a 1-year salary. Or a university like Brandeis will usually bring someone and pay them per course. So this is how much people in the US are making average per course, right? So you all have TA, you know how much work it takes to TA one course. So now in order to put together a living, you have to, you know, teach 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's really hard. So just keep these in mind, and that's going to help you also see how the job market is working. Universities right now are kind of shifting, I think, out of the tenure track role. A lot of people think so. In the past year, there's been a lot of more increases in the types of position that I came into, which is kind of like you are here for every department and you're doing your research, but you're also teaching digital technology. There's a lot of different ways that you can be in academia without having that traditional tenure track historian role, and then also be able to pay your rent. Keep that in mind. And again, this is why you should be doing this. I'm sorry if I freaked you out, but I think it's important for you to understand that. So digital history tools and methods, this is everything that you're going to be able to do. It's about collecting information. It's about disseminating it, managing it, analyzing it, showing it to people, outreach. Any of these things I'm showing you are going to be something that you can use in your research. You can use in your teaching. Something I think that all of you should be thinking about with any of these tools is like, okay, when do I have the time to learn this? If you're TAing and you're interested in, say, learning how to do a text analysis, ask the professor you're TAing for, can I make a text analysis activity for the students? Right? Because then you learn it, you get something on your teaching portfolio, and then you're also like producing scholarship that way. There are ways around it that you just kind of have to be savvy about it. Okay, so now historiography, the first thing we're going to talk about. So the idea with historiography in these tools is that you're basically saying, like, what are people publishing about? What are people talking about? How does it change over time? You can get very, very complex with historiography, but I'm going to show you some like very simple things you can do. Okay. Scopus, this is a database that Brandeis has. JSTOR, you all know what JSTOR is. If any of you are working more with like contemporary analysis, Twitter is a really great data set. There are tools like Sentiment Viz that you can type in topics and it'll pull out the tweets for you and show you trends over time. JSTOR has a bunch of different tools. They have this thing called JSTOR Labs. One of them is called Constellate. Have any of you used this? No? So this is actually a really great thing that you could be using with students, for example, or also just for your research. So you go to the Constellate website. For example, part of my research I'm interested in is ancient Greek mountains and specifically sanctuaries on mountains. And I'm interested in seeing like when are people actually researching this and talking about it and publishing it. You can put in, you know, Greece and ancient and mountain, and it'll show you in the JSTOR database how many hits it's getting over time in terms of like the subject of the article the person is writing is this. You can get way more complex. It can, you know, do different publication dates. You can hone into specific journals, and also you can adjust it by language as well. And then within that, you can then pull into specific other kind of keywords. So for example, here I'm saying, okay, I want to see Bronze Age, Iron Age, and Hellenistic. These are cultural periods. So then I can see over time which scholars are studying that with regards to what period. So this is something that is very useful. You can pull these visualizations out, you can publish them. It's a data set that's already ready for you, and you can use this in your, yeah.
Can I ask what happened in 2010 that people got interested again?
Yeah, so what happens is that, so this particular subject used to be super interested. People used to be really interested in it like back in the day, 1800s, 1900s. 2010, there is a surge in certain types of geospatial analyses and view sheds, and specifically people are able to, you can use GIS to measure, like if I'm standing at a location, what can I see? And 2010, 2020-ish, that time, people figured out how to embed 3D models of structures onto the GIS. So then you can also incorporate, like, there's the temple blocking my face and I can't see past it. And I'm sure all of you can think of a way this would work for your own projects. This counts as digital scholarship.
Is
Yeah.
that keyword, is it searching like the text of documents or the titles or the?
It's
like,
pulling-
What exactly is it? The
it's
Library of
pulling-
Congress?
It's pulling from like when you when you go in the library catalog, it shows you like the abstract, or like when you submit an article and it'll pull in the keyword, it'll ask you for keywords, it's pulling that, it's pulling the title and then abstract, I believe. The Scopus one works very similar to this. The difference is that it's pulling from Elsevier, which is a more scientific driven set of databases. So if any of you are interested in like climate history, for example, you can actually compare hits from here versus there. Right, because this database JSTOR is largely hitting humanities and social sciences, it's not hitting STEM. Elsevier is hitting STEM, so then you're going to see that difference.
Is it? Not, so I just like tossed something in, and I also have a massive crash in 2020.
Yeah.
Is that just because it's
Yeah.
like 2020s are not?
If any of you have submitted a publication before, 2020 is usually like when it was released, but not necessarily out yet, right? So there's that problem too. So depending on when the articles are actually being released, that can be part of it. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, like I can always talk to you about like, how do you talk about data biases and things like that. I've used this before to talk about people using like racist language, for example. You can look at that kind of a trend over time and see when it's being published and when it's not. Okay, so this is something you all can do. Analysis. So that past option is technically text analysis. Text analysis can get really kind of big though. The idea is basically that you want to see relationships between words. These particular examples I'm going to show you are if you have like a text already. So for example, like if you have like digitized, so not scanned versions, but if you actually have like the typed version of like written letters, documents, government documents, anything like that, diaries, there are a bunch of tools you can use where you can put in the text and then you can pull out different analyses. I know this looks kind of crazy, but like, for example, this software right here, it's called Orange. It's very much plug and play, right? So for example, one of the research projects I'm working on is looking at this local Italian-American religious festival, and they have a procession where they like pull through the statue. And I'm using it as kind of a comparison to ancient Greece. And so I have had people locally fill out these surveys that were asking them like, what do you think about this festival? What is it like? And so putting it into this, it gives you a really nice visualization saying like, these are the words that people are using most. So like when people talk about this festival and they think about this festival, are they looking at it as a religious or not religious thing? Right? For most people, it seems like they're associating it with both religious practice, but also as like an Italian-American cultural festival. You can look at negative versus positive tone. So we'll actually like these like embedded codes where you can give it the data and then it'll actually say like words that are paired in this way are negative and words that are paired in this way are positive. You don't have to know any of that. You just tell it to use that. And then it actually gives you a visualization. So I asked people, how did COVID impact your experience at that festival? And one is the most negative, right? So I was actually able to see this visualization of like showing like a lot of people had some negative things to say. It's a way to show that information. There's also numeric values too, but like this was good for this. So again, this is something, there's a couple of different software packages you can use with this. And I can help you Orange. There's another one that the library has, and I have the information for the person you can contact. But again, this is all stuff that you can learn within like an hour or two. You have to tweak the data a bit, but yeah. Oh no, my little fun things didn't work. Okay, well, those all had text fields in them. But anyways, oh, they're all right here. So this is that festival I was talking about. So I gave out a survey in Google Forms, so you can make a Google Form survey. Are any of you working with modern populations? Yeah, you might be. Okay. Yeah, so you can make a form survey. You have to work with the IRB. You can make a survey. You can ask people to fill it out. And then it gives you the output in an Excel spreadsheet, right? And Excel has a bunch of embedded tools just to make simple graphs. Okay, fine, graphs, whatever. But graphs are a really good way to visualize relationships. And what that was going to show you is that when people asked why they attended the festival every year, this 75% was all people who were going for basically like more secular fun reasons. Like they want to see the band, they want to go to the carnival, they want to see friends. And then like this group was the one that was saying that it was a religious event for them. If you can, in any of your information that you have, any of your books, your texts, if you can envision how to put it into a spreadsheet, you can do a lot of analyses. The putting it into the spreadsheet part does take a little bit of finesse, and it does take a little bit of troubleshooting, not in terms of like the technical part of it, but actually figuring out like, how do I take this diary and put it into a spreadsheet? Like, how do I take people and make them into rows and columns? That's tricky, and that's a big part of your methods, but you luckily have a lot of people here who do that regularly, and we can help you figure out how that would work. The one thing with something like this I want to talk to you about is that I've had a lot of grad students recently coming to me being like, I'm almost done with my master's thesis. I'm doing the final, edits, and I want to make some graphs. You want to think about the graphs, not as like, this is a visualization for the end. This is your information, like this is your analysis, right? So you want to be doing this kind of stuff first, and that's going to give you an answer, and then you write about it, right? So like, for example, people have been saying like, oh, I think it'd be really cool if I made a word cloud. Okay, cool, yeah, it's a cool thing to add your master's thesis, but it would have been a really good thing if you had that first, because that probably would have guided some of the analyses and some of the interpretations you had, right? So you want to think about this kind of stuff earlier on, as opposed to yet. If it's at the end and you're just realizing the now, sure, you can still do it, but like, it's good to think about it ahead of time. I'm gonna get into like making spreadsheets and stuff like that, because that's like a really definitely custom thing. But if any of you are interested in any of this, you're gonna want to be thinking about the information you have, how you're gathering it, and how you're gonna be saving it. So you all have data, right? I know STEM people usually the ones who have the data term, but everybody is using data. Data is information you're collecting. So you need to figure out a way to save it and store it and present it in a certain way. Okay, so now Alex is going to show us an example of some data visualization that she's doing.
I'm showing data visualization through collaboration. I'm not doing it. I don't know anything yet that is like IT or technology. But I do come from a corporate setting. So I used to work in a corporate setting before coming to grad school, which makes me pretty good at networking. So I made a connection with a data visualization specialist. Her name is Esther Cotona. She's a survey statistician, doing all this great stuff. She wrote her dissertation on text analytics and research methodology through data visualization. And she's interested beyond its practical application in examining the ethical perspective, which she got out of working with me because I'm doing Holocaust history. And we understood that on a map, putting arrows or points to show people, dead people isn't very ethical. So we had to work with a little bit of philosophy there, which helped her and especially me with getting what we get. So I was working with, I always work with oral histories. And this is a set of data or primary sources that I have, which are over 3,600 protocols. They are all basically victim sources, immediate post-war survivor narratives. And this is the data that we're using together with Esther. So we have the name and we have tons of locations. So this is where this person was born. This is where this person lived, and this is where the person was deported to from Hungary. And within the text, there's also information about where this person was deported from, which ghetto, transit camps, everything is there. So these texts, these 3,600 texts are all TXT files as well, because they were digitized by a group of researchers, and it's actually open access online. So during my master's program, all I was doing was reading them. And then when I met Esther, did I understand that that's all, there's all valuable information there for me that is more than just reading on the paper. So we did this together. All the data from this 3,600 protocols, which is about 3,600 people, survivors of the Holocaust. And the first big, which is not a big discovery because every Holocaust history book will tell you that the Hungarians were the last chapter of the Holocaust. They were the latest group to have been deported, and they all ended up in Auschwitz. But then I put in the survivors, and I understood that those who had been deported, really the majority was deported to Auschwitz. And the majority of the people died, but the remaining people who did survive, these are all the forced locations that they had to go to. And this is not in the scholarship, this is not there in historiography. So basically, just by working for, and it was a couple minutes for Estet, I could decentralize Auschwitz and I could really tie into the historiography and show that, okay, Auschwitz is not the general experience for Hungarian survivors. So I think this is a huge result that I wouldn't have been able to do if I just read all the oral histories themselves.
Going back to my point about, just thinking about jobs and all that, I'm not an expert in a lot of the stuff that is considered digital history, right? So I've been learning some coding, but I still have to talk to people. Part of the part of this is just learning the correct language to then be able to ask for help. You didn't even know it was like a possible thing until you happened to speak to this person, and then you realized it. Going ahead, you're like, okay, well, now I understand when I look at a historical document, what I have to unpack, and then how to communicate that to, say, an engineer. So, I mean, things that I know some people on the campus are doing, for example, like there are computer science PhD students, right? And they are people who are going to be kind of on the flip side, wanting to get some more experience working with more humanities-based topics. If you can envision something like this, like, don't necessarily think you need to learn all the coding, right? Think about, how can I take my topic and bring it to someone, and how can we work together? But Davis, you have like 3,500 documents, knowing, what is this word?
Is present.
So present, so, like the birth date, the death date, the location, all that, knowing how to break this up into, if I said you, we need to put this into a spreadsheet, you would then being familiar with the documents, know what would make sense as to like where you should make the breaks. Learn all this yourself, but just knowing that, again, okay, well, text analysis. Now I know I need to go talk to someone about how to take 3,500 documents and look for patterns. Okay, so far I've talked about like historiography, text analysis generally, network analysis. Spatial analysis is basically looking for patterns between locations. So have any of you heard of GIS? The Geographic Information System. Okay, so some of you might have taken a class where you might, or made TA where you use like story maps or something. That's what spatial analysis is. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. There's a bunch of different softwares, but essentially what you're doing is saying, like, can I stack a bunch of layers on top of each other to find relationships? So I just like threw this map together. I don't know if this is actually historically relevant, but this is California. And all of these different areas in California, these are showing population percentage of Japanese at-home speakers. And then these areas right here are WCCA assembly areas. So essentially they are the areas where there were internment camps for Japanese people in California. And so I was like, okay, is there a correlation between modern day Japanese speakers and, where they are living in California and possibly had put down roots for a while, and then also where they were brought in California to stay for World War II. So again, this is just an example, but you can take layers of information and try to find spatial relationships. Historical data is a little more tricky because you do have to sometimes make it, because this information is first being created and then you're manipulating it, but it is possible. So you can do something like with GIS. So this is called ArcGIS, which is something you can learn at Brandeis very easily. There are a couple of open source options. I would recommend sticking with ArcGIS first. I can talk to you more about that. Even more basic stuff like doing some like quick maps in Google Maps, Google Earth, things like that. Those are all really great ways to, again, set yourself apart, show people that you're thinking about digital technology. Being able to create your own map for a publication is going to really help, so that you're not asking a bunch of people if you can reuse their information when you try to get permission from publishers. GIS is definitely something I can help you with, but we also have someone at Brandeis who it's their job is to help people learn how to use this. Yeah.
Is that like a training, a course, or it's one-on-one?
So Charles Golden, he teaches a course in GIS that I think is excellent. It is in anthropology, but you're studying people too. And that one is, I think, more linked between what you're working on now. because the RAP one is more kind of more interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. And then you can also set up like personal meetings with the GIS librarian, Alex Willett, and they will show you how to do all of this. And this is also something I can help you with. The GIS stuff is stuff that you can definitely learn on like kind of like at home on your own and then keep working through it. If you can and you have the time, even just like auditing that class, I think would be really great.
Well, this is from, again, my master's thesis. It's about a district in Istanbul. And this is this one source that I use, my primary source. It is a WACF document, and WACF means what? WACFs are the foundation documents of people's charitable trusts. So you have this foundation lists, documentations of many people in one city, and the books are designed as you have the district name at the top, and then you have the quarter name, and then you have the endower's name and the endowment list. So I just tried to find a way that to a spreadsheet. I did it by hand. The most difficult part of it is doing it by hand. And then I did a Google Earth thing and just pinpointed all of these places on the Google Earth, and then pull that data to use on GIS. I created all of my data myself, which was the most difficult part of it, actually. So here you see the visualization of it. In the can I go back? Yeah. In the column, for example, I put the name of the endeavor and their gender and their profession and their status and many other things. And the map, in my case, also worked as a graph. So you can take the gender column and see that how the gender distribution of the landowners or endeavors were. So it kind of has that ability to graph things that doesn't really essentially special, but if you want to go special, you can also do that. So I have this one foundation here, and from the data, I realized that it was getting money from all different parts of the city, for example. In one other example, which is the foundation document of the district, the person Koca Mustafa Pasha, who was a Grand Vizier of the Beyazıt, he had like this 3 grand complexes. One in this one is Yenice, this is Nevrikov and Istanbul, and you see that all of these 3 complexes getting money from all around the empire, but mostly the western sides of the empire, mostly Thrace, the Eastern Europe. So you wouldn't see them getting money from Anatolia or other parts of the empire, which was actually kind of important in the end for me. So GIS really helped me in visualizing things, because again, like you wouldn't get that by reading the document by itself.
Alex is into these projects together. The GIS basically is an Excel spreadsheet, and the difference with it and the Excel spreadsheet is that then there's another field that then says where that happened, like on a map. It has coordinates, like when you know when you move like your cursor around in Google Earth, there's like latitude and longitude. That's what it is. So like Alex's project right now doesn't have those coordinates, but like we could add them in, and then you could make a map. That's the difference. If you're doing GIS for anything that is not contemporary, you're going to be doing a lot of kind of data creation and data cleanup, and that's usually like the bigger part of it. And this is very much the same thing as any of you working your primary source documents, right? You have to figure out where you're working, you have to figure out how to organize them, all that. It's the exact same thing. You're just putting it in a different format and thinking about it a little bit differently. Public outreach, all of that. These are really big ways, again, that you can kind of connect to the public and kind of bring history to life. It's a way to, ensure that your research has an impact on someone. It's something that a lot of people are seeing, for example, in grant applications, project applications. They want to see how you are connecting to a modern day population. On another level, it's also a way to kind of advertise for yourself. And I mean, there's a ton of different ways that people are going about this. I'm not suggesting that you all need to become like history Instagram stars. Like, that's not what I'm saying here. Some people do it and it works for them. There are ways for you, even if you're just like, you know what, I love my moleskin and that's how I am, that's fine. But there are ways for you to still present yourself in a way that is kind of in an updated digital way. Very simple things that, well, this one takes some effort, but so some things you could do is that, you know, you're going to be putting out articles. You're going to be writing a book. That book has chapters. You could, for example, commit yourself to saying that every single time I publish something scholarly, which is usually behind a paywall, I'm going to create a version of that that is public and interactive. You know, like, so have a blog, write a piece for a magazine. You could use story maps, for example. You want to create something that public people can get access to. Again, from that idea of getting jobs, scholarly writing and writing for the public are two very different styles. And it is something that everybody struggles with, including myself. My husband is a writer, and like, you sound like an academic, no matter what I do. But yeah, so he like writes horror fiction, and I think I write something that's casual, it's not. But so it's something you can try to do, but just making sure you have that, it shows to people that you're trying. So I mean, and also just to, okay, when you write scholarly articles and you put out publications, you're not getting paid for them, right? You're not going to get paid for them. You will get paid eventually for your book, but like every single time you send something to like the American Historian, you're not going to get paid. I've been doing this a bit. The store has like a new software coming out. They know this is something I'm interested in because I've just been networking with it, and they paid me to write a version of the article. And they paid me a decent amount of money. It's something that people are trying to do more. Science communication, science writing, same idea. Thought pieces on social media, like Twitter, things like that. Even just having a research website. So WordPress, Google, using story maps for a research website is actually a really good idea because you all are working inherently with geographic information to some degree. You're telling a story about a place and its place and time. And so I'll show you story maps in a second, but that's an option. Another thing that you should just be thinking about, again, also with job applications, is just kind of branding yourself consistently. This PowerPoint presentation, this template, like I use this template for everything, right? And then this template kind of matches like the letterhead I use. And then that looks like the same thing I have on a website. And it kind of makes this brand, it makes you seem and look professional. Like you've shown that you are thinking about how things look online, which is something people care about.
Who is the market for like public facing versions of academic articles?
Who is the market?
Yeah.
So I mean, just anybody. So, okay. Do you guys realize how much money Brandeis pays for things like JSTOR? Why you guys have access to that is because you guys have been in the university system for years, right? You don't even think really about that. But otherwise, if you're not in a university system, you have to go to the public library and even just to think about looking that up. But if you're someone who's just, you know, works in business and is genuinely is interested in history, where are they going to be looking for their information? And so a lot of what would be kind of like your standard history publication. Like for me, it's the American Journal of Archaeology, which is kind of like one of the big
Historical system.
Yes, the American Historical Association. It might be worth looking to. Sometimes these bigger publications, they have like a magazine that they send out every year. They will have it for people who are like, again, not academics, but they pay to be a member of the association. And then they have those magazines and they will have kind of articles in them. And they're often written by kind of top tier scholars, right? But again, it's about getting information out and having access to it. Because again, also it's helping because if you get, you know, rich guy who really likes history, interested in your research, they might eventually fund, you know, XYZ thing. Also things like NPR, for example, the New Yorker, just stuff like that. They're always looking for people who are academically trained scholars who can write well. And I'm not saying that this is something you should like put all of your eggs into by any means, but again, it's just a way for you to have kind of another additional stream of income, but also because it makes sense, right? You're producing all this information that matters. It's about people and it's by default behind a paywall. Right? So it's a way for you to kind of take charge and control the information you're creating and saying like that other people deserve to read it as well. I mean, especially for those of you who are working with populations that are outside the US, right? If you're writing and publishing for a US publication, you could write something in the language of the other country that you're working in, right? For archaeologists, a lot of time you're talking about working with the modern population at the archaeological sites, like working with the local community, creating museum installations. There's all different ways you could do it. But it's just a way for you to kind of think about it in a dual way. And again, I really encourage you all to start looking at job ads, and public history, public historian, public writing. Those are also really big keywords right now. And so again, you just want to pay attention to those kinds of things. And that's something you could do. So for example, how many of you have used story maps before? Heard of story maps? Okay, so story maps is pretty big on campus. If any of you are a TA or TA at some point, you'll probably come into encountering it. It's basically like a way for someone to make a website. It's a free software. You can make a website, but it's a way for you to like easily embed images and maps. So, you know, for example, like you'll be reading and you can scroll, and as you scroll, you can feed images and maps to the reader, and it can like bounce the map around for them. It's totally free software. It's something that a lot of people are using for that dissemination aspect of their project. And it's also something that's really great for undergrad students. If you want to kind of get away from that idea of like, let's make a 8-page research paper, or let's make an 8-page research paper that's digital, that you own, that you can present, that you can send out to people. The undergrads all have to follow different liberal arts requirements of Brandeis. So one of them now is called digital literacy, which actually is really great. And the idea is that you're graduating and you should have some semblance of digital skills or understanding of it, even if you're not in a STEM major. And so something a lot of people are doing is using this in their class. So again, you're learning how to like construct a website. You're learning about this idea that like, you know, your 8-page traditional thesis paper will be reframed if you are going to be presenting in a way that is going to be showing maps at the same time, right? It's about getting the undergrads to think about how to restructure their argument in a way that matches the platform that they're showing. So for example, like think just simply, you have an 8-page paper, and then you also have to give a presentation, you have to think about how to structure that in a different way, right? You might not show it in the exact same order for a presentation. So it's the same kind of skill set. There's a couple of other companies that are coming out. So like I said, so JSTOR is coming out with one now. It's called Juncture, and they got in contact with me and they had me write an article for it, and then they paid me for it. And so the ArcGIS story maps, it's something that a lot of people are familiar with. It's very simple. It's very much plug and play. It's like it's a template. They'll say, put your title here. Where do you want your map? You put in little points. It's very, very beginner friendly. And that's a really great way if you want to make a very dynamic and professional looking website. The story maps is a really great way to do it. I linked some online tutorials, one that I made that I use with undergrads all the time. Like it's very accessible. That's something that's very good to have. And again, like you do one and then you can put it on your CV and say, I know how to use story maps. And this is something that people are using a lot in the classroom. So then when you're talking about your teaching website, be like, I know how to do this because I've used it before.
My dissertation topic and research mostly focusing on this a very particular overseas Chinese gold mining communities in West Kalimantan, nowadays Indonesia, roughly between time of 1740 and 1880, I would say. Yeah, so it's the early modern period. And I've been doing research about this particular group for a long time. In 2019, I went there actually with Professor Hang together to do some field works there and to visit all these relics of this old gold mines and everything. So it was so this page, or basically this website, was a project, in-class project I did when I was at Georgetown, did my master in 2019. Yeah, 2019 actually, after I went back from Indonesia. It was a class on digital history, and we were required to build up our own digital project. And it was at that time that I began to kind of see this possibility of maybe create an archive that is specifically for Gongsi, for this particular Chinese communities. This is actually basically the assignment I had for that class, and it's almost becoming a, where's the mouse?
Oh, so it's the mouse on my left.
Is
Oh,
this-
that one works too. Okay. Go for it.
So yeah, so this is a prototype. It's for the in-class assignment, so which is very rough. Or I did put some documents on it. As we can see, basically what Natalie just said gives a perfect summary of what my intention is. I want to make engagements with broader communities outside of academia. It was actually during the trip there, I recognized that we recognize that there were actually Chinese descendants associations, clan-based communities there who were very actively and enthusiastically invested in tracing the footsteps of their ancestors 200, 100 years ago. And they invested in memorial parks, they invested in temples, they invested in all sorts of things. So then I began to have this idea, okay, so as long as you don't have file or built up by your country, you should be able to access the internet, right? So what about we put a multi-language based archive that is accessible for all the communities? In that case, if I do archive research for my dissertation, for my research in the future, right? I meet somebody in the local, I can simply just show them the website. And so that's the initial idea. So I did this for the class and assignments, just very quick tour of it. We have some documents here. First of all, I introduce briefly about the situation and who are we. That's the reason why I use the term we here, because Professor Hang and I, and we have a lot of scholars, independent scholars, teachers in Malaysia, China, Indonesia who are interested in this. I want to make sure that we give the audience, whoever wants to visit the archive, a sense that it's a group that is gradually building up this entire project. In that sense, it's going to be very long-term, and it's going to keep updating, right, over time. So yeah, so this is very rough. I use the platform, by the way. I use the platform called Omeka. It's a platform you can use, very popular. If you want to build up digital exhibitions, digital archive, it's I would say it's very easy to use. This is a prototype, and I want to start a new one because, as you can see, the domain name here, that's actually one of the challenges I met. It's called Georgetown.domains, right? I don't want to use that. I'm not at Georgetown. I don't think I have access to the back stage of this to operate anymore. I want to use a new third party that is associated maybe with Brandeis or more independently, right, in the future. So, but still, it's very powerful, and it's not powerful, but helpful for actually my grant applications. As Natalie said, I kind of put the link to this in my grant proposals to different fellowships and everything, to show them that this is something that I have been working on for years, and it is keeps going on. And also I'm interested in maybe add one chapter in my dissertation to introduce this archive. If in the next 2 or 3 years, through the process of my dissertation writing, I do encounter more sources and have the chance to actually, as I said, build up a new one using a new platform. I do see a great potential in this one because academically speaking, this Chinese gold mining communities is belong to the young earth group that we call marginalized group, right? Scholars have been struggling with the scarcity of the primary sources of these groups. By doing this, you actually build up a model or show people an example of, okay, if we want to collect history sources for marginalized or silent groups in the archives, there's actually a way to do this. This is Indonesian, this is Chinese, this is English, and I think I should add Dutch in this new one, I believe. And we have language source based in Chinese, based in Indonesian, and also based in English. And also, most importantly, we have genealogical records from local Chinese descendants and families. So you can say that that's also one of the challenges of building this archive, is that how you categorize it. It's going to be tons of workloads, right? And how you interpret all these sources. Just the final show is quickly, I'll quickly click into one, and you can see you need to add descriptions, you need to add the creators, the date, and most importantly, the rights, right? So if it's going to be very personal from the families on the ground in Indonesia, right, you need to gain their permission, right? And that went through whole bunch of processes in a case-by-case manner, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so I mean, I just, again, if you're applying to grants and things like that, they're often going to ask, I mean, most cases, they're going to ask you one, like, how are you going to be saving and preserving the information that you are collecting? As a data management program, like the NEH, it's a standard thing that they're asking now, it's National Endowment for Humanities. The other thing that they want to see is, like, how are you engaging with the public, that those are sections that you actually have to fill out. And so, you know, having a plan like that is great. And so like, even like you said, it's a class project, is something you started, but you definitely should be mentioning like, hey, this is something I'm thinking about. This is like, it's my draft, right? Because the other thing with this is that like these digital projects, they don't have to be finished. Like digital projects are it's very much like a, you know, you figure it out as you go. It's never going to be completely done. It's never going to be perfect. And, you know, obviously you had $1 million grants, like you could probably get a lot more done, but historians usually don't. And so like, and other people understand that. And so it's about kind of figuring out the best way to present the information as you go. So, yeah. So Omeka is, it was, I think it's House of George Mason, their history department. And again, it's just like, it's an interface, and you can basically kind of create like an art, like a kind of like a museum collection. Again, something that like people use in undergrad classes. It's very, very approachable. There are fields, you fill them out. So I'm saying data, I know you often say sources, but you do have data. So you are dealing with you have hard images, you have digital versions of the images, you might have sound bites, you might have video. You all know what historical data looks like, right? The other data you have are like your research notes, creating notes for classes, and then creating notes for your dissertations and for your exams. You are creating an archive of your research, right? The articles and the books you're citing. This all is something you need to be thinking about in terms of how you can organize it and then share it in a way that is not necessarily even having to just make sense to anybody else but you, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because, okay, so you're going to graduate. So right now you all have tunnel vision, right? Your tunnel vision is dissertation, get a job. So the dissertation is like very much the first step of your career. And I'm saying this to you, and I know it's super hard to hear that, but it's very much the first step of your career. You're going to graduate that dissertation. You need to turn it into a book, right? You need to turn it into articles. So that process takes time. So like I finished my dissertation in 2019, and I'm almost done writing all the articles for it. And I just decided one article is actually going to be a chapter in my book, right? I have to figure out, I'm looking at stuff that I've been writing for years and going through it and sifting through it. Every once in a while, you might be doing some research and you say, that might be a really good idea for a paper one day, but I don't have time to do it, right? So you put it down somewhere. You need to make sense of this information in a way that you're going to be able to communicate with yourself 4 years from now, okay? So like, no one is going to graduate and then flip around and produce their tenure track book overnight. It's going to be a 5-year process, right? And stuff your dissertation is going to end up in that tenure track book. You need to make sure you can read your handwriting. You need to make sure that you can find that stuff. So we're going to be talking about some things you can do. But Robert is going to share an example. I'm going to talk more about the dissertation stuff, and Robert's going to show you an example of something called tropy, which is more about visuals.
And you all can hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, great. All right, so yeah, this tool called Tropy, I can't see the room, so I would love to ask how many of you have heard of this, but I'll just sort of talk about—
So far we have one thumb down.
Okay. Very well. Well, this is another tool. I believe it's also affiliated with George Mason, coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally. This is a free and open source software that I discovered and I've started using increasingly. And I think rather than beginning by talking about like the software, which is really the tool, I wanted to think about the problem. And this is a problem that I think any or all of us are probably already dealing with. If you are early on in the program, maybe not yet, but once you go to the archive, once you access a digital archive, you're going to come away with probably hundreds of photos. I know I was in London over a year ago and came back with like, I think it was over 100 gigabytes of data. I needed to have images of all these photos, certainly, you know, to sift through later. And I needed to figure out how I could start arranging them, managing them, organizing them in some sort of meaningful way so that I could actually access the data within them. And finding some way of sort of associating annotations with them, tying metadata to them, and so forth. And what Tropy is meant to do is to really aid in this process. So it lets you organize and describe photos of research material. So as you can see here, I've put together some items here, and I'll sort of briefly talk about them. So instead of having, as I do have, a bookworm-eaten 1894 document here, which is actually beside me on my desk, I now have taken the photos of it and created a digital item here that you can see. And it's not a series of 54 photographs in Tropy. It is one item, and all of these different photos, as you can probably see there, can be arranged throughout. You can also do some photo editing. It is certainly not photo editing software. This isn't, Photoshop Lite, but you can rotate, crop, zoom. You can actually even adjust some of the sort of contrast, hue, saturation, all that sort of stuff. You can invert colors if that helps you see things better, and so forth. And it is, I should make clear as well, this is not a citation manager software like Zotero. It isn't a platform like Omeka for presenting this online. This is software that you download and install, and it lives on your hard drive. So this is not necessarily the best option for sort of sharing data with others, like JJ was showing with Omeka. But it's definitely something that is useful for yourself, just to make sure, for instance, that you don't have, picture DSC 0084 through 0125 that are an item. You can actually tie them together. You can add this metadata, as I don't know if you can see here or not on the side, I hope so, where I say who's created it, what date, what type it is, where it comes from, what the identifier is, and so forth. You can import in JPEGs, also PDFs as well, which is very useful if, as I mentioned, you're accessing digital archives and you download maybe digitized newspapers or something like that. It can be very useful for that. And I think with that, I will pretty much stop there and see if there's any questions about this.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The text searchable or no?
Okay, I was sort of anticipating that question. So Tropy, they've been getting a number of requests over the years to build in a built-in OCR, optical character recognition plugin or some sort of functionality. As of now, it does not do that. But I would say that if you're looking to recognize the text, you can either use Transcribus, which I've dabbled in a little bit, and I'm guessing Natalie or someone else there probably knows much more about than I. Or I would also advertise this. This was a very happy surprise to me. If you have a bunch of these images living on your hard drive and you own a Mac that is running, I believe it's Monterey. macOS Monterey introduced a live text feature that actually auto OCRs photos. And so when I started using Spotlight search for somebody's last name, I suddenly started coming up with all of these images on my hard drive that my OS had just quietly in the background started OCRing for me. But as
Robert, when you go to the archives, do you take these pictures in Tropy, or do you take them all and then have to categorize them like in the evening after your day of research?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I basically take them with my camera or my phone or whatever I'm allowed to use in the archive. And then I usually put them into folders or somehow make notes of which files each one goes in. And then later, once I have time, then I'll import them into Tropy. And there's a reason for that. Tropy is multi-threading, but it's pretty intensive on your processor when it's mass importing a bunch of photos. I think what it's doing is probably creating copies, it may be processing them or organizing them. I'm not exactly sure what all is going on underneath the hood, but you definitely don't want to do that if you're on battery power in the archive or something like that. It's best.
Does this grow the space, the space of your computer, the reserved space? Is it like or it's smaller size?
You know, that's a great question. I think I would have to do a little more searching. I've this computer has a pretty large amount of space, so I haven't been too concerned about that, but I can definitely see that that could be an issue. I'm happy to look into that and message you with an answer to that if you'd like. Or actually, I would say I can also, where's the chat here? I can even just throw in the links to the resources. I think it's tropy.org or something like that. And they've got some pretty good tech docs on there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so there's, I mean, there's a number, this is one thing, but again, I think one of the points here is that like, before you get to the archive, a good thing to do maybe sometimes is to think about how you're gonna save this stuff. Or, you know, you might be like maybe halfway through getting stuff from your archive and it might be like, you know, is it worth it for me to stop and organize the stuff now and then implement a system? And I know it sounds like a huge deal, but I've had to do that before and it does end up helping you in the end. But if you're about to start kind of thinking about your dissertation or thinking about your master's thesis, you want to kind of sit down and be like, what kind of information am I collecting? Where am I going to put it? How do I want to organize it? Not going to be perfect, but it's better to start somewhere as opposed to just having 1,000 photos dumped on your computer in a folder. And again, it's something that has to make sense to you. So like all of the organization methods that Robert is using makes sense for whatever questions he's asking. And then this software is allowing him to construct that. The best thing I ever did was start a digital research journal. Literally can be anything, but what this means is that, you know, you are doing research for the day. Write down your notes in this system or write it in your Moleskine, but then transcribe them. But the reason why is because, again, your dissertation is going to take more than a year. You're going to be writing stuff that is published based off your dissertation for years after that. You want to make sure that you can find things and not just shuffle through the pages, but actually look through and find them. You need to basically set yourself up. Do this for future you, okay? So the thing that I recommend, again, you can use any software, like you could use just Google Drive if you want, but I use something called EndNote. EndNote is free up until a point. Basically, you can upload like pictures and stuff. And once you've surpassed like, I think like 4 gigs or something of data, then they start charging you like $30 a year or something. But so I started using this for my dissertation and I still use it to every single day now. And again, you can organize this however you want, but the idea is that, you know, I have different notebooks for different things. So I have my research journal, and that's just like, I write down every single day when I do research, like I did this. This is weird. This didn't work. Make sure you look up this thing. I had a field journal, which I guess to you would be kind of like when you go to do archive research overseas, like every single day, you're gonna be like, day 1, I looked up this stuff. Day 2, I looked up this stuff and this person yelled at me, like day 3 and all that. And the thing with these kinds of systems is that they are searchable. Digital research journal is that part of it was like, I was doing analyses with GIS, right? So I was making all these different files. Sometimes things didn't work and sometimes things broke and I had to figure out how to do stuff. None of this is going to make sense to you, but this was just my thought process at the time. But for example, like there's this file I have for my dissertation called place_CVSO. You don't need to know what it is, but that file is really important and I still use it. And I made it like 4 years ago, but I have a question about it. I can search for that file and then I see every single thing that I've done with that particular file because I mentioned it. This thing is only going to be as powerful as the amount of information you put in it. But again, it's indexed, it's going to be auto-synced. So like I have this on my phone, I have it on my iPad, I have it on my laptop, right? So like I was standing in the middle of a field in Greece and I was writing it on my laptop, on my iPad. And then when I went back to my hotel, it synced. I've written like paragraph grant applications on this thing on my phone. So like there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Journal, I've got funding applications that I write in here. I've got my research journal. I've got like teaching notes in here, all that kind of stuff. But the idea is that anything that you think is important, as opposed to having a million different Word documents, it's all in this one thing that's going to be searchable.
That I'm using it right now, but it's nice too. Also, the tags feature
Yeah.
is really useful, which when I was studying for my comprehensive for the comps, I would put, because they're going to ask you lots of questions about themes and stuff like that. So I put like capitalism whenever I like had a text that was about capitalism, and then I could just search capitalism and all the text where I tagged that.
Yeah.
I could then see where I tagged it in the text.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's really useful. There's a color. I know there's a couple embedded, there's like, I know there's a lot of things like that, but just consider using one of these. And it's something that you might need to kind of get the hang of to figure out how it works for you. You know, similar stuff, like everybody's going to organize their bathroom in a different way, but eventually you figure out a way that really works. And that's what this is. What it suggests is that every single, not, you don't have to do it daily, because also you're not going to necessarily do research every day, right? And that's the key. So every single time you have a research session, just make an entry and you say like, this is what I did. This didn't work. This was weird. I'm starting to think that I shouldn't be classifying people by this. That's going to help later when you write methodology, because you're going to have to write a method section where you say like, this is why I categorize people in these different ways. And then the other thing you need to do is the next thing you need to do. That's the important thing. So for example, like I'm writing this code right now and I was working on it and then I got sidetracked because I have other stuff to do. And so when I came back to it, like last time I worked on it was January 10th, right? Again, this doesn't make any sense to you, but I know it means I have to work on the right rows issue next. So now I know. So instead now I'm not standing there being like, what was I working on? I have no idea. That kind of thing is really useful. In addition to this, again, something else you should be thinking about is something called a data dictionary. This kind of goes back to what Robert was talking about. You're gonna have files, right? You might have PDFs of things, you might have images of things. I just really suggest having a running list where you say this file is this, and it is stored here. Because again, like if you have like 50,000 photos that are all from an archive and they all basically look the same, they're all of a piece of paper, right? It's useful for you to be able to know which one you're talking about. A running list of future article ideas. Every once in a while you get a really good idea, or you might be talking to one and be like, oh, we should write an article on that. Oh, that'd be a really good chapter idea. Like keep those written down, because eventually if you do hopefully get that tenure track job, you're gonna have to write articles. So then you're gonna have a list of stuff. And the other thing is that how many of you have like a document somewhere where you've just kind of pasted everything you've ever written but cut out of a paper before? Yeah, so sometimes I do it because emotionally I'm upset and I don't want to delete the paragraph that I thought was really good, but actually has no place in my paper. But also if you keep it, then you can use it later, right? Especially on grant applications and teaching applications where you basically copy and paste things over and over again. That's something you also should use. And again, you put it in here because you can search it. So this is something I really recommend you do. How many of you are using a citation manager?
With Zotero?
Yeah. How many of you are using Zotero or EndNote or Mendeley? Oh, okay. I don't care which one you use. You should use one. A citation manager is basically where you dump all your citations and you keep track of them. And it will automatically reformat your citations for you. So if you're writing an article in one and it's saying, you know, write an APA, and then that article gets rejected, and then you submit it to another article or another journal, and they're like, oh, we want it in Chicago 16, it'll convert it for you. It's really great. The other thing that's really great about these is that there are ways to really customize these. This is EndNote, but Zotero, EndNote, Mendeley, they all have the ability to make subsections for you. And again, you should be thinking about this. I have groups that are basically like, I'm going to be teaching this class eventually. Like, you know, next year I need to start making my syllabus. I want to put that article in that syllabus, dump it in there. My book on Patmos, I've got article, this one's about Christianization, cool, dump it in there. Greek islands, cool, dump it in there. Because then I'm not sitting there being like, what was that really random text or article I read about inscriptions that doesn't actually have inscriptions in the title. So if I search it, it's not going to come up. It's there. Your exams. So you mentioned tags. I make tags here. So this is actually from my PhD exam. So I wrote method exam, theory exam, area exam. You can highlight which ones you've read and which ones you haven't. If you're translating, I was like, yes, I have translated this out of Greek. No, I have not. Yes, I have. No, I have not. It's a way to keep track. Iterative writing software. If you do some research, there are tons of different ways that you can write your dissertation that are not in Word. Is really awesome. A lot of these examples came out of softwares that were originally for people writing novels and writing plays. Scrivener was originally for that, and now it is pretty standard for dissertations. This is something that like one person in my cohort found out about, and then we all secretly kind of started talking about, and then we all started using it. This was like $50 and it's yours forever. The idea with this is that, again, kind of like Evernote, you can kind of make groups and move things around. you're never gonna write from point A to point B, right? It's not a linear thing. You might move sections around. So you can make little sections, you can move them, you can view it as a text, but you also can view it in cards. Every single little document you make, you can make metadata for it. This is a paper right now, the intro. I have my opening example. Then I have like my method section. And I actually can like, for this section, write like a little paragraph about it. I can put keywords in it, searchable. This thing, it seems really kind of overwhelming, but this thing has saved my life more than once. It's really cool because I have like this binder and it has like 8 different papers I'm writing at once, all in one thing. And that's cool because the stuff you write is all kind of tangentially related, right? You can put your cut sections in here. You can put your notes in here. It doesn't have like the automatic write when you cite, like with Zotero and everything like that. You can basically drag the citations in. And then when you're done writing in here, you bring it into Word and then it formats it for you. This is an example from my, like one of my research papers. Like here's an entry. This is like a source I'm reading. Here's my notes. And then you can write a little synopsis. In-depth description of burials, practices, and dendra. Key points included this. You can add little like tags, and this one I wrote bibliography mining. Because I was like, I need to go through this bibliography, it was really good. So I actually can now go through my scrivener and say like, show me every single source that I said bibliography mining. So now I have this list of all the ones that I was like, I need to go through these bibliographies. It's all very customizable. It did take a couple of kind of weeks for me to figure out what worked, but I will never now write outside of this thing. I don't do like my research notes in this just because I like the fact that the other one is like, I can use it on multiple devices. So this is something you can't like sync across multiple devices. If you're interested in this, I can talk to you about this. This is not something that like the Brandeis library supports. Like you can't get it through IT or anything, but I can help you with it. The other thing you can do is just like right now, like just search article writing software, academic book writing software, and there's a ton. So again, like I'm not writing my dissertation anymore, I'm writing a book, I'm using it. This was my dissertation, this is half of my dissertation, right? And then I search Apollo, and then like you can see everything that's coming up. You can flag things, so like my results section had little light bulbs. Like you do actually have the time. I'm saying to be strategic about it. Like if you're TAing, say like, hey, do you want to do one of these consulate things? Like, let me figure it out. And then make it for them. And then you put it on your teaching statement. This thing is not hard. This is basically like learning how to organize your folders in your computer. It just, when I opened it, I was like, this is stupid. And then after an hour, I was like, wait, this is great. You just have to kind of figure it out. The thing Robert was talking about, same idea. It's basically folders for you to organize your photos. The story maps thing, you all could learn it within the next 20 minutes. I could all, yeah, like it's very easy. If you can upload something to Instagram, you can use story maps. That's basically how it is. So like, just try to think about like the specific thing I'm studying. What's something I could do to give myself an angle, right? Because it's going to help you get it done, but it's also going to maybe help you answer a question that you don't realize, like Alex's project, right? And also think about who you could talk to. Like there are going to be computer science students who want someone, like they need projects too. And a lot of them do need to have this like requirement where they need to engage with the humanist project. So like go ask someone. Be like, let's double up. Then you have 2 papers. You put one in the comp sci, and then you put one in the history journal. All right. And then the last thing I'm gonna say is how many of you are backing up your stuff? Okay, cool. It's better than what I heard before. So I would recommend that you do a backup to your cloud and then also to a physical hard drive. Okay. I have to say this, for the amount of grad students I've been meeting who are not backing up their dissertation, that is making me lose sleep. If you want a really great $50 recommended hard drive, I suggest this one. What I'm doing is making this new section. It's called Digital Scholarship at Brandeis. It's a bigger project. It's going to be coming out probably at the end of summer. The idea here is that this is obviously like the template we're using, the chinchillas, but the idea here is that basically every single grad program is going to have their own guide, and it's going to be written to that discipline. So like you're going to be able to go there and be like, I'm a historian. I need to know how to organize my photos from an archive. Then we recommend these things, and then we link you to specific workshops. I'm a historian. If I was going to learn to code, which coding language should I do? And then it's going to link you directly to the one and then tell you why you should learn that coding language. Okay. Or like, I want to learn how to do GIS. Why would a historian want to learn GIS? And in addition to that, what we're doing is working with a bunch of different faculty on campus and also non-faculty. And the idea is then asking them, you know, what digital tools are they using for their discipline? Basically, they're doing interviews, saying like, what digital tools are they using? Where do they see their discipline going? All of that. And it's gonna all be there. So you'll be able to see stuff from historians who are working both in academic positions and not. So this will be eventually up for you. And I think that'll be a lot easier for you to kind of figure out what you want to do. And then the other thing is that it's going to also have kind of like a flipped tool where you're just like, I need to make a map. And then it shows you where to go. Broadly, again, like I'm an archaeologist, but I'm working with old stuff. Okay. So I can help you if you have this kind of question. I can help you kind of figure out what you need to do or who to talk to. If you have any question about a digital thing and you don't know who to talk to, just ask me and I can show you who to go to. But this is all the stuff I can do. If you guys want to talk to me about like, I want to start submitting to a journal, I can help you with that. Those are things that actually do tie into digital scholarship about in terms of prep. And then also how to prep for a digital job market, because that's really the way you should be thinking about this. And you really should be thinking about it as soon as you can.